Welcome to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, the podcast where open source reporting is transformed into expert intelligence and analysis. This week, Neil Bisson, a retired Canadian Security Intelligence Service intelligence officer and the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, breaks down a series of developments that underscore how terrorism, espionage, foreign interference, and gray zone activity continue to reshape the global security landscape. In the United Kingdom, the new head of MI6 delivers a blunt public warning about Russia's use of hybrid tactics concerning cyber operations, sabotage, and influence campaigns that sit just below the threshold of open conflict. In the United States, a Canadian businessman is arrested for his role in a high-profile case involving the alleged smuggling of advanced AI chips to China. In Hong Kong, the verdict in the Jimmy Lai case sends a chilling signal about how national security laws are being used to criminalize journalism, dissent, and engagement with the West. And in our main story this week, we go to Australia, where the deadly ISIS-inspired attack at Bondi Beach has shaken the country and forced a deeper examination of terrorism, radicalization, and the growing threat facing Jewish communities across Western democracies. In Canada, authorities lay terrorism-related charges against a Toronto man in a case that shows how antisemitism, criminal violence, and extremist ideology continue to converge. Taken together, these stories reveal a clear pattern. Today's threats are interconnected, adaptive, and increasingly difficult to separate into neat categories of crime, terrorism, or espionage. Are you ready? Then let's go.
Hello, and welcome back to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, a retired intelligence officer with CSIS and the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. Each week, I provide analysis and intelligence from open source reporting on terrorism, national security, espionage, and foreign interference, so you can have a better understanding of the threats to your country, your career, and your safety. It's been a busy week, from the head of MI6 discussing the threat of Russian gray zone attacks to the horrendous ISIS-inspired attack on Bondi Beach in Australia. As usual, there's a lot to cover, so let's get into it. For our first story, we start in the UK, where Britain's new head of MI6 has gone public with a blunt warning about Russia's intentions and behavior. In her first speech since taking the role, MI6 chief laid out how Moscow is using a mix of traditional espionage, hybrid tactics, and emerging technologies to challenge Western security, and why the threat is not theoretical, but ongoing. The speech was delivered on December 15th by Blaise Metrelli, who assumed leadership of the Secret Intelligence Service in October. Metrelli is the first woman to lead MI6 in its 116-year history, and her remarks are notable not just for their tone, but how directly Russia was identified as a primary state-based threat. She described Russia under President Vladimir Putin as aggressive, expansionist, and revisionist, a regime willing to use intelligence services, proxies, and unconventional tactics to undermine Western society. Her warning focused on activities that sit below the threshold of open war: cyber operations, sabotage, influence campaigns, intimidation, and the weaponization of technology. From an intelligence perspective, this matters because it reflects how MI6 sees the battlefield shifting. This is no longer just about recruiting agents or stealing secrets. It's about continuous pressure, probing defenses, testing red lines, and exploiting political, economic, and social vulnerabilities across allied countries. The timing of this speech is important. It comes nearly 3 years into Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and amid growing concern across NATO about spillover risks. European intelligence agencies have increasingly warned about Russian sabotage plots, cyber intrusions, and covert operations targeting infrastructure, defense industries, and political institutions. What makes this speech stand out is that MI6 leadership has traditionally stayed out of the public spotlight. It is reminiscent of CSIS Director Dan Rogers' speech earlier this year. Also, the first time the director has spoken publicly about the threats Canada is facing. When the head of Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service speaks openly, it is usually meant to send messages in multiple directions: to allies, to policymakers, to the public, and to adversaries. Metrelli placed heavy emphasis on technology, stressing that modern intelligence services must be fluent in digital tradecraft, artificial intelligence, and cyber capabilities. This reflects a broader shift within Western intelligence communities, where human intelligence is increasingly fused with technical collection and data-driven analysis. For Russia, this blended approach has been standard practice for years. Intelligence services are not just collectors. They are instruments of state power used to intimidate, influence, and disrupt. MI6's message is that the UK and its allies can no longer afford to treat these activities as isolated incidents. They are part of a sustained campaign. The key takeaway here is that this was not a routine speech. it was a strategic warning. MI6 is signaling that Russia remains a central threat to European and Allied security, and that intelligence services must adapt rapidly to meet the challenge. Russian gray zone tactics aren't just reserved for Europe. Canada is just as vulnerable and likely a target of this type of hybrid warfare activity, and the Canadian intelligence community needs to pay attention to identify the subtle signs of sabotage and proxy operations here at home. For listeners in Canada and across the Five Eyes, this speech should sound familiar. The tactics described, cyber interference, covert influence, sabotage, and intimidation, are the same issues intelligence agencies are grappling with at home. As this threat environment continues to evolve, the line between peace and conflict will only become more blurred, and intelligence services will be at the forefront of navigating that space. We head to the United States for our next story, which highlights how economic crime, export controls, and national security are now deeply intertwined. A Canadian businessman is being described by U.S. prosecutors as a serious national security risk, as American authorities move aggressively to keep him behind bars ahead of a trial over an alleged scheme to smuggle advanced AI chips to China. At the center of this case is Ying Yu, a Canadian citizen arrested in the United States in 2024 and now facing charges linked to illegal export of restricted U.S.-made artificial intelligence semiconductors to China. Prosecutors argued that Yu played a key role in attempting to bypass U.S. export controls designed to prevent sensitive technology from reaching China's military and intelligence sectors. U.S. authorities have gone to the unusual length of opposing his release on bail, describing him as both a flight risk and a national security danger. Court filings outlined concerns that if released, Yu could flee the country, destroy evidence, or continue facilitating access to controlled technology. From an intelligence perspective, this case is not about one individual trying to make money. It reflects a broader, systematic effort by Chinese entities to acquire advanced Western technology through intermediaries, front companies, and trusted foreign nationals. The technology at issue involves high-end AI chips that are critical for advanced computing, machine learning, surveillance systems, and military applications. The U.S. government has placed strict export controls on these components, explicitly citing national security concerns related to China's military-civil fusion strategy. Over the past several years, U.S. authorities have charged multiple individuals and companies with attempting to evade these controls by routing shipments through third countries, falsifying end-user information, or using foreign passports to mask ultimate destinations. What makes this case particularly sensitive is the nationality of the accused. As a Canadian citizen operating within the U.S. system, Yu allegedly provided a layer of plausible deniability that could make detection more difficult, a tactic intelligence services have seen repeatedly in technology acquisition operations. The language being used by U.S. prosecutors is telling. Calling a defendant a national security threat prior to a trial is not routine in economics or customs cases. It signals that intelligence assessments are likely informing prosecutorial strategy behind the scenes. This also demonstrates how export control enforcement has become a frontline intelligence and counterintelligence issue. Advanced semiconductors are no longer just commercial products, they are strategic assets. Preventing their division is now viewed as essential to maintain technological and military advantage. This case raises uncomfortable but necessary questions. Canadian citizens and companies operate globally, often with minimal scrutiny, and can become attractive targets for foreign intelligence services seeking access to restricted technologies. This case underscores how modern espionage and national security threats increasingly operate through legal gray zones, business deals, technology transfers, and commercial logistics rather than classic spycraft. I've made this comment before on this podcast, and I will likely make it again. Artificial intelligence is dual-use technology. AI is a new arms race, and this time Canada is involved in that race. As AI and advanced computing become central to military power and surveillance capabilities, expect to see more prosecutions framed not as financial crimes, but as national security cases. For Canada and its allies, the message is clear. Economic security is national security, and technology smuggling is no longer a niche issue, it's a strategic battlefield. We head to Hong Kong for our next story that focuses on the use of their national security legislation as a political weapon. Media tycoon and pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai has received a verdict in his long-running national security case, marking a pivotal moment in Beijing's crackdown on dissent and press freedom in the territory. Jimmy Lai, now in his late 70s, was found guilty under Hong Kong's sweeping national security law. legislation imposed by Beijing in 2020 following months of pro-democracy protests. Lei, the founder of now-defunct Apple Daily newspaper, has been in custody since December of 2020, spending years behind bars while facing multiple prosecutions. Prosecutors accused Lei of collusion with foreign forces and using his media platform to promote sanctions and international pressure against China and Hong Kong authorities. The court's decision confirms what many observers feared from the outset, that the legal outcome was largely predetermined once the national security charges were laid. From an intelligence and security standpoint, this case is not simply about one individual. It demonstrates how national security laws are being used to criminalize political expression, journalism, and engagement with foreign governments. The national security law fundamentally altered Hong Kong's legal and political landscape. Its vague definitions of crimes, such as secession, subversion, terrorism, and foreign collusion, give authorities wide discretion and leave little room for defense. Since its introduction, dozens of activists, journalists, lawyers, and former legislators have been arrested or forced into exile. Independent media outlets have shut down, civil society groups have disbanded, and self-censorship has become widespread. Jimmy Lei's case has drawn particular international attention because of his profile, his outspoken criticism of Beijing, and his long-standing ties to Western democracies. For Beijing, securing a conviction in such a high-visibility case serves as a deterrent signal to others, inside Hong Kong and beyond. What stands out here is the deliberate framing of political dissent as a national security threat. This mirrors a broader global trend in authoritarian states where intelligence, law enforcement, and judicial systems are merged to suppress oppression under the guise of security. The use of national security legislation allows authorities to bypass traditional legal safeguards, restrict public trials, and limit access to defense counsel. In intelligence terms, this is about control of narratives, deterrence through fear, and the elimination of alternate sources of information. For Western intelligence services, cases like this are closely watched. They illustrate how adversarial states redefined, quote, security to include journalism, advocacy, and international engagement, areas traditionally protected in democratic societies. Jimmy Lei's verdict marks another decisive step in Hong Kong's transformation from an open society into a tightly controlled political environment. The implications extend far beyond one courtroom or one city. For Canada, the United States, and other democracies, this case reinforces the reality that authoritarian regimes increasingly view information, media, and political speech as battlegrounds, and are willing to use the national security laws to dominate them. This is not just a story concerning Hong Kong. It is a warning about how the language of national security can be weaponized to silence dissent anywhere. This week's main story takes us to Australia, where a deadly terrorist attack at Bondi Beach has shaken the country and raised renewed concerns about the rise in terrorism, extremism, and the targeting of Jewish communities in Western democracies. The attack occurred on December 14th near Bondi Beach in Sydney during a Hanukkah-related gathering attended by families and members of the Jewish community. Two attackers opened fire, killing 15 people and injuring several others before police intervened. Police have since confirmed that 15 victims were killed in the attack and that one of the attackers, Sajid Akram, was shot dead by police at the scene. His son, Naveed Akram, survived the incident after being critically wounded and was taken into custody. Australian authorities moved to secure the area, deploy counter-terrorism units, and reassure the public. The scale of the attack made it the deadliest mass shooting in Australia in nearly 3 decades, immediately triggering national mourning and heightened security around religious and public venues. From an intelligence standpoint, the location and timing were not accidental. Bondi Beach is a symbolic, high-visibility public space, and the event being targeted carried religious and cultural significance. This combination is consistent with attacks designed not only to kill, but to send a message and generate fear far beyond the immediate victims. Australia has largely avoided mass casualty terrorist attacks in recent years, but its intelligence services have repeatedly warned about lone actor or small cell extremism, particularly linked to overseas ideological movements. Jewish institutions in Australia have already been operating under elevated threat levels following the October 7th attacks in Israel and subsequent global tensions. What stands out here is how quickly authorities characterized the incident as terrorism rather than random violence. This suggests early intelligence indicators and evidence recovered at the scene pointed toward ideological motivation. Attacks like this are designed to test public confidence and force governments into reactive security postures. They also serve as propaganda tools for extremist movements, even when those movements are not directly operationally involved. For intelligence agencies, the challenge is not only prevention, but managing the aftermath, countering narratives, protecting communities, and preventing follow-on attacks inspired by the same ideology. The Bondi Beach attack is not an isolated tragedy. It is part of a broader pattern of ideologically motivated violence aimed at Jewish communities and open democratic societies. The question now is not whether this was foreseeable, but whether governments and security services are adapting fast enough to prevent the next attack. For the following 3 segments, I will be taking a deeper dive into what we know about this attack and analyzing the available information to provide a better understanding of what transpired and what we might expect going forward. As with any investigation, the information is coming in quickly and sporadically, so verification and validation of what is being reported may be difficult. I will break this down into 3 separate sections: the attack, the perpetrators, and antisemitism and the growing threat to Western nations. Let's begin by breaking down what we know about the attack. The incident has been categorized as an act of terrorism and has reignited global concerns about the targeting of Jewish communities and the evolving threat environment facing Western democracies. The attack unfolded in the late afternoon near Bondi Beach, one of Sydney's most iconic and heavily visited public spaces. The location was hosting a Hanukkah-related gathering, attended by families, children, and members of the Jewish community. Police have since confirmed that 15 victims were killed in the attack and that one of the attackers, Sajid Akram, was shot dead by police at the scene. His son, Naveed Akram, survived the incident after being critically wounded and was taken into custody. Emergency services described the scene as chaotic, with victims scattered across a densely populated public area. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and other senior Australian officials quickly addressed the nation, confirming that counter-terrorism investigators were leading the response. Flags were lowered, visuals were held across the country, and security was immediately increased at Jewish schools, synagogues, and community centers nationwide. From an intelligence standpoint, the choice of target, timing, and setting point to deliberate effort to maximize psychological impact. Public spaces tied to religious observance remain high-value targets for extremists seeking visibility and symbolic resonance. Australia has not experienced an attack of this scale since the mid-1990s, and while its counterterrorism posture has remained robust, recent years have seen fewer mass casualty incidents. The Bondi Beach attack comes amid heightened global tensions following the war in Gaza and a documented rise in anti-Semitic threats across multiple Western countries. Jewish communities in Australia have already been operating under increased security advisories prior to the attack. The incident reflects a broader shift in extremist targeting, away from hardened government or military targets and toward open civilian gatherings that are difficult to secure without fundamentally altering public life. From an intelligence lens, attacks like this serve multiple purposes. They are meant to kill, but also to terrorize, polarize, and provoke overreaction, which can then be used by militant groups to justify further attacks. These acts of terrorism test the resilience of societies and the ability of governments to protect open spaces without retreating into permanent states of emergency. The rapid police response likely prevented an even higher death toll, but the strategic impact of the attacks extends far beyond the immediate casualties. In the following days of the attack, Australian counterterrorism police detained several additional men in southwest Sydney. Authorities say the individuals may share ideological commonalities with the Bondi attackers, though they have stopped short of confirming any direct operational link. Police disclosed that Bondi Beach was among locations that the group had discussed, reinforcing concerns about follow-on or copycat plotting after high-profile attacks. The Bondi Beach attack is now a defining moment for Australia's national security conversation. It demonstrates that distance, geography, and strong institutions do not provide immunity from ideologically motivated violence. This attack will shape threat assessments not just in Australia, but across the Five Eyes as intelligence services reassess how extremist violence continues to adapt. Here's what we know about the perpetrators. As the investigation into the Bondi Beach attack has progressed, Australian authorities have released more detailed information about the individuals responsible. What emerges is a case that reflects the evolving profile of ideologically motivated terrorism, one rooted in radicalization, access to weapons, and exploitation of systemic blind spots. Australian police have identified the attackers as a father and son duo, Sajid Akram, age 50, and his son, Naveed Akram, age 24. As mentioned, Sajid Akram was shot and killed by the police at the scene, and Naveed Akram was critically injured during the police response and taken into custody under armed guard. Australian authorities have since confirmed that Naveed Akram has been formally charged with 59 offences, including the 15 counts of murder, multiple counts related to attempted murder and wounding, and a terrorism offence. Police allege the attack was carried out to advance a religious cause and intimidate the public, citing early indicators of the Islamic State-inspired ideology. Sajid Akram was a licensed firearm owner residing in New South Wales, originally born in Hyderabad, India, and having migrated to Australia in 1998 under a student visa before later gaining residency. Authorities confirmed that he legally owned multiple firearms, several of which were recovered from his home following the attack. The fact that a licensed gun owner was able to carry out a mass casualty attack highlights how ideological risk can go undetected even within highly regulated firearm systems. Naveed Akram, an Australian citizen, had previously come to the attention of security agencies as early as 2019, though not at a level that the authorities stated had warranted sustained surveillance. Investigators since confirmed the extremist material linked to Islamic State ideology was associated with both men, including propaganda and material glorifying violence against Jewish communities. Police also recovered improvised explosive devices from vehicles used in the attack, which were later rendered safe, indicating the potential for an even higher casualty count. Authorities have deliberately described the devices as suspected improvised explosive devices, but their presence nonetheless reinforces evidence of pre-planning beyond a spontaneous firearms attack. A key line of investigation has focused on the pair's recent international travel. Authorities confirmed that both men traveled to the Philippines between November 1st and November 28th, transiting through Manila and Davao. Sajid Akram traveled on an Indian passport while his son used an Australian passport. This highlights an issue surrounding dual citizenship and access to multiple passports. Individuals looking to travel to participate in terrorist-related activity, whether that be training or perpetrating an attack, can facilitate that travel and stay off the radar of authorities by using different but legitimate passports to enter countries where scrutiny would warrant closer attention to their travel. Investigators stress that there is no conclusive evidence the pair received terrorist training or had direct contact with an overseas extremist group during that trip, but I would speculate that Sajid may have attempted to do just that. This travel, combined with online radicalization and access to weapons, fits a familiar pattern seen in ISIS-inspired attacks globally. Rather than centrally directed plots, these cases rely on ideological motivation, symbolic targeting, and personal grievances. The attackers reportedly told family members that they were going on a, quote, fishing trip, underscoring the level of deception and compartmentalization that often precedes attacks of this nature. From an intelligence perspective, this case highlights several persistent challenges. First, the radicalization process can span years, with individuals fluctuating between low-level concern and operational violence. Second, legal access to firearms, even in jurisdictions with strong gun laws, can be exploited when ideological intent goes undetected. And most importantly, this case reinforces how ISIS continues to function as an ideological accelerator rather than a command and control organization. The absence of direct operational links does not diminish the strategic value of the attack from an extremist perspective. For intelligence agencies, the terrorist attack by the Akrams underscores the difficulty of prioritization in a threat environment where hundreds or thousands of individuals may exhibit warning signs, but only a small number progress to violence. The Bondi Beach attackers were not foreign operatives or sophisticated planners. They were a radicalized father and son who leveraged ideology, legal access to weapons, and the openness of a democratic society to commit mass murder. This is precisely what makes modern terrorism so difficult to prevent, and why intelligence services continue to warrant that inspired attacks remain among the most persistent threats. We can't discuss the Bondi Beach attack without addressing the larger issue of antisemitism and the threat to Western nations. The Bondi Beach attack must be understood within a much broader and deeply troubling trend. Across Western democracies, anti-Semitic incidents are rising sharply, and in some cases escalating from threats and vandalism to planned or executed acts of mass violence. In August of 2024, Canadian and U.S. authorities disrupted a terror plot involving Mohammed Shahzad Khan, a 20-year-old Pakistani national residing in Canada. Khan was arrested as he attempted to travel to New York City, where intelligence indicated he was planning an ISIS-inspired attack targeting Jewish communities, including synagogues. Investigators determined that Khan had been radicalized primarily online and motivated by extremist ideology rather than any direct personal involvement in overseas conflicts. The case was particularly concerning for Canadian authorities because it demonstrated how domestic radicalization can translate into cross-border threats relying on freedom of movement and open societies to operationalize violence. In the United States, recent anti-Semitic attacks have underscored the same threat trajectory. In one particularly disturbing incident, a lone individual entered a Jewish religious setting and set congregants on fire, causing serious injuries and reinforcing fears that religious spaces, once considered relatively safe, are now viewed by extremists as legitimate targets. These cases, combined with the Bondi Beach attack, reveal a consistent pattern. Jewish communities are being deliberately selected for their symbolic value, visibility, and perceived vulnerability. Since late 2023, law enforcement and intelligence agencies across Canada, the United States, Europe, and Australia have reported significant increases in anti-Semitic incidents. These range from harassment, vandalism, and threats to arson plots, assaults, and attempted mass casualty attacks. What is particularly alarming is the convergence of ideologies driving this violence. Jihadist extremism, far-right conspiracy theories, and grievance-driven lone actor violence increasingly overlap in their targeting of Jewish communities. Global events, particularly conflicts in the Middle East, are used to justify violence against civilians who have no direct connection to these conflicts. Extremist propaganda frames Jewish individuals and institutions as legitimate stand-ins for broader geopolitical grievances, eroding long-standing norms that once separated political conflict from civilian life. From an intelligence perspective, anti-Semitism has become a powerful mobilizing tool for extremists. It provides a clear ideological enemy, emotional grievance, and highly visible targets that guarantee media attention and social impact. These attacks are not just an expression of hate, they're strategic acts. They are designed to instill fear, fracture social cohesion, and force governments into reactive security postures that strain democratic norms. For Canada, the implications are direct and immediate. The disrupted New York plot demonstrates how individuals radicalized domestically can pose threats internationally, reinforcing the importance of intelligence sharing, early intervention, and proactive threat disruption. The Bondi Beach attack should be viewed as part of a broader warning pattern. Anti-Semitism is no longer confined to rhetoric, graffiti, or online abuse. It is increasingly being operationalized by individuals willing to commit extremist violence. For Western democracies, the challenge is twofold: protecting vulnerable communities while confronting the ideological ecosystems that continue to normalize and encourage this violence. Failing to address either side of that equation risks allowing this trend to accelerate. We end in Canada this week for our last story, where authorities have laid terrorism-related charges against a man in Toronto following a broader investigation into hate-motivated violent crime. The case highlights the exact issue of anti-Semitism we focused on in this issue. It is a clear indication of how domestic extremism, criminal violence, and ISIS-inspired ideology can intersect, and how intelligence-led investigations often uncover national security concerns well after initial criminal activity comes to light. According to the RCMP and local police, Walid Khan, 26 of Toronto, has been arrested and charged with terrorism-related offenses for allegedly participating in and providing support to the Islamic State. Khan was charged following a joint investigation involving the RCMP's Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, Toronto Police, and Peel Regional Police. Khan is accused of engaging in activities intended to benefit ISIS, including online support and participation in terrorist-related activity. Authorities allege that his actions went beyond extremist rhetoric and crossed into conduct that posed a credible national security concern. The terrorism charges are connected to a wider criminal investigation involving two additional men, Osman Azizov, 18, and Fahad Sadat, 19, both from the Greater Toronto Area. Azizov and Sadat were previously arrested in connection with two armed attempted kidnappings earlier in 2025, one in Toronto and another in Mississauga, incidents that police later characterized as hate-motivated and targeting women. While Azizov and Sadat are facing serious criminal charges related to those incidents, the RCMP has stated that only Khan currently faces terrorism-related charges, based on evidence gathered during the broader investigation. From an intelligence perspective, this case illustrates how terrorism investigations often emerge from seemingly unrelated criminal activity, particularly when ideologically motivated online extremists and access to weapons intersect. Police allege that the investigation began after two violent incidents in May and June of 2025 in which armed suspects attempted to abduct women in public spaces. As the investigation expanded, law enforcement agencies uncovered evidence suggesting ideological motivation and extremist alignment, prompting the involvement of national security investigators. Authorities have stated that extremist material linked to Islamic State ideology was associated with the suspects, and the searches conducted during the investigation resulted in seizures of firearms, ammunition, and related items. Police have emphasized that the alleged activities were not spontaneous but reflected a pattern of escalation from criminal violence to ideological extremism. This case fits a broader trend seen across Canada and other Five Eyes countries, where individuals radicalized online become involved in both conventional criminal activity and terrorist-related conduct, blurring the lines between public safety and national security. From an intelligence standpoint, cases like this highlight the challenge of threat prioritization. Many individuals come to the attention of authorities for criminal investigations long before any clear terrorism nexus emerges. Determining when ideology shifts from belief to intent and from intent to action remains one of the most difficult assessments intelligence services can make. The fact that terrorism charges were laid only after a broader criminal probe underscores the importance of integrated policing and intelligence cooperation. It also reinforces the reality that ISIS today, as previously mentioned, functions less as a command and control organization and more as an ideological accelerator, inspiring individuals to act independently while serving the group's strategic objectives. For Canada, this case is another reminder that terrorism threats are not confined to foreign battlefields or Five Eye countries. Radicalization can occur domestically, quietly, and alongside other forms of violent criminal behavior. The arrest of Walid Khan and the related charges against Osman Azizov and Fahad Sadat demonstrate how modern terrorism investigations often unfold indirectly, emerging from criminal violence, hate-motivated activity, and online radicalization rather than traditional overseas plots. While it's up to the courts to ultimately determine guilt, the case reinforces a key message for Canada's intelligence and security agencies. ISIS-inspired extremism remains a persistent domestic threat, and early disruption remains critical to preventing escalation into mass casualty violence. Well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode. I'm recording this on the 20th of December, and I want to wish all my listeners a relaxing, happy, and safe holiday. Whether you're traveling to visit family, celebrating at home, or enjoying a restful holiday on your own, I wish you the best of the season. And as always, until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
That wraps up this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. Thank you for listening. As we head into the holiday season, Neil would like to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and to thank you sincerely for spending part of your week with this podcast. Every story we covered today, from intelligence warnings about Russian gray zone activity, to terrorism and anti-Semitism in Australia, to technology smuggling and extremist threats here in Canada, all of them reflects just how complex and interconnected the global threat environment has become. These are not abstract issues. They are unfolding in real time, affecting democratic societies, open institutions, and vulnerable communities around the world. Producing the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up requires extensive research, daily monitoring of open source reporting, and careful analysis to deliver clear, accurate, and independent intelligence insight each week. If you find value in this work, you're encouraged to support the show by visiting Buzzsprout, where you can make a one-time or ongoing donation. Your support directly helps sustain the podcast and ensures this analysis can continue without interruption. Don't forget to subscribe, share the podcast with others, and leave a review. It helps more listeners discover the show. And as Neil always reminds us, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.